and welcome to the Lens at 177. And as we build up towards the general election on December 14th, today we are going to tackle another social issue that's affecting our nation. And Selina Kuruleca, a psychologist by profession, is joining us. Selina, in your line of work, you handle suicides, violence at home, stress, depression, anxiety, mental health, well-being of a person. That's a lot to deal with.
Yes.
How do you survive?
I have a very good support network. I have supervisors that I still talk to from the university I attended in Santa Clara, California. And we also have a good team of mental health locals here, mental health specialists. So we also share these caseloads by talking about the various issues that we find, and also just trying to educate ourselves as much as possible on what's current, what are best practices, so that we can remain active and we can remain effective in our job. Yeah, but it's a lot of work. You're right, Anish. Yeah.
All this I've mentioned: suicides, violence, stress, depression, anxiety, mental health. If you lump all together, what's the current health status of Fiji?
Wow, mental health in Fiji during the COVID-19 pandemic, we referred to it as the mental health epidemic happening here in our country. And I must say, we can also say that globally, mental health pandemic, in Fiji, epidemic within the pandemic. Why is this? Because we had so many people showing or presenting with symptoms that showed a decline in their mental health performance. What do we mean by this? There's an increase in domestic violence, increase in attempted suicides, an increase in addiction problems. So people were using lots of drugs more than they normally would. And there was just general upheaval in people not knowing what to do, where to go for help, people not having a stable source of income. School was disrupted. So children who were staying home were also staying with parents who were stressed out because there was no source of income, or the likely source of income was unknown. And it was just really difficult. Do we have evidence to back this up? Absolutely. We have figures from, from the Ministry of Health, from the other NGOs who work in this space, from the Fiji Police, and the use of the stats is to inform us of what's happening in our population. We also have statistics at the only psychiatric hospital there is in Fiji, which also helps look after others in the region, which is the St. Giles Psychiatric Hospital. As we speak now, bed capacity about 100, 81 beds are occupied. More males than females. Again, these statistics are consistent with global trends. We talk about suicide, even though the suicide attempts were less than during the COVID, it is still relatively high for a small country like ours. This year, as we sit here and speak about this issue, we have 90 completed suicides in Fiji, compared to the same period last year, about 60. So about 30 more than the same period last year. So a lot of concern for the various issues people are going through. Fiji is a very small island country, and some of these things can be managed better. We can talk about the elderly. For the last quarter in September, in terms of suicide numbers, the elderly population had the highest numbers of completed suicide. And we discussed this at great length at the national level, as well as in the various committees that we sit on. It is alarming, and it is also consistent with global trend, because a lot of our elderly people are being pushed aside. They're not looked after. Our welfare system in supporting our elderly people is just not strong enough. Has not been strong enough for a while now. So that, of course, means that a lot of people don't know where to stick their elderly people. There's a long waiting line in all of our residential homes. People who used to look after their elderly before, most of them have now migrated to go on the Pacific Labor Scheme. Good on you for going to work, but then who else now is looking after the family, who is looking after the elderly? So all of this is contributing to, I guess, our mental health. I know it is contributing to our mental health. It is also contributing to the general decline in people's morality and values, the lack of compassion and kindness. Having said that, I'm not trying to take away from the individuals or organizations, corporate bodies, and some arms of government who have tried to reach out to help those people whose mental health has been impacted by COVID in so many different ways. Yeah.
Let's talk about the stats you've given me about the suicides and the elderly part of it, the elderly citizens. What does it say about a country like Fiji when the elderly decides to take his or her life?
You know, when we first discussed this issue, it's very sad. It speaks to the fabric of our society, that it's crumbling. It speaks to the fabric of our society where maybe we talk a lot, but we're not doing anything about it. We're a nation that prides itself on being a Christian state, or so we say, or that we're a state that values all people and all races and all religions. This is great, and you know, I like the way it sounds, but in practice, what does it mean if our elderly people think that this is an option for them? And these elderly people, you know, they are people who, the stats that we have show that they're in their early 60s. So a lot of them could still be productive. Maybe we should be looking at, you know, employment possibilities for them. But they've lost their jobs for whatever reason. Some of them have hit retirement at 55. And again, you know, maybe retirement should be later. But they're at their prime, and then there's nothing to do. And because there's nothing to do, the young families whom they stay with, whom they look after, also lost their jobs, so there's nobody looking after them. So I ask us again, I challenge the citizens of our country, what are we doing, you know? What can we do? What can policymakers do? Because, you know, if there's political will and political will and resourcing of the political will for us to build more elderly homes, perhaps, for us to have more activities for our elderly, for us to have more activities to keep our youths engaged, maybe have more values education. Perhaps then we will be able to look after our older people. But it's very sad. We were very disappointed. Some of us got really angry that it was our elderly, because then we also think of our own parents. And, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing? And I think each of us needs to ask ourselves that question. What are we doing? If the policy makers are not making the policies to support the infrastructure, then we need to look at how can we build, how can we start that national dialogue? How can we make sure that that national dialogue becomes action? Because that's what we need if we're going to have a decline or reduce the numbers of suicides of our elderly people.
The suicides, also you mentioned the St. Giles bed currently at 90 plus or something. Yeah. Do you think all this data is with government or whichever ministry in the government?
Yes, yes.
And why aren't they, or why isn't the state taking action?
The state has, the figures we have is vetted or comes from government, comes from the various government departments. They know these things, the workers know these things, the staff members. Comes to the policy. In the law, let's take, for example, the Mental Health Act. 2010, we've been reviewing it, and it's now 2022. So some things like that, because when the policy is in place, then people have to resource it and build the infrastructure to support the policy. Unfortunate for us, we have a lot of policies that have come out. Some are very good, some are not so good. Yeah, I guess you could say that for any country in the world. But in turn, you don't support the building of the infrastructure so that you make the policy work, then you have dilapidated state homes. You have programs that are built on interventions from 50 years ago. And unless that changes, unless it is resourced, then we're going to be in this state for a very long time. For example, you know, sometimes I just sit down and I think, right, how about we just take this chunk of money from here and put it here? And, you know, we could have so many effective programs for our young people. How about instead of trying to build a $10 million jail, we take the $10 million and put it into education programs after school so that our children who are lagging behind can catch up. How about we go take the $10 million and put it into rural development and make their farm roads work and build mini hydros and build village farms so that the woman can access their village farm easily instead of waiting for the men, so that it can work. Because unless the individual is healthy, then the family is healthy, then the community becomes healthy. But there seems to be a huge gap between what the policy is saying and what the service delivery is. I feel the pain of a lot of our health workers. I feel the pain of our teachers. They are doing the best they can with the resources they have. So obviously we need more resourcing, but then with the resourcing needs to come the leadership that we're going to commit to this and, you know, turn this policy into action. And I think for us, in many fronts of the different social issues we are facing, that's what's lacking, the strong leadership to use the resources in the way that it's meant to be used so that we alleviate some of these social problems.
Thank you very much, Selina. We will take a short break and continue the discussion after this break. Welcome back, Selina. Let's continue the discussion, and specifically on mental health. How can a person say that he or she has got mental illness and has to go and get treated?
Okay. I'd like to start with the definition. On the right is mental health, on the left is mental illness. When we talk about mental health, we're talking a whole state of being where we are fully functioning, can contribute to other members of the society, can contribute to society. Stresses hit us, we get up and we keep going. We'll say we're mentally healthy. Mental ill health, or not so well, a stress hits us, we get up, in a few days, a few years, we are not as productive as we normally are. We get up and instead of, oh, I need to get my life together and keep moving towards this side, get up and I take on an addiction. I start drinking a lot, I start smoking, I cannot complete a task. We're moving towards mental ill health. So very, I guess, basic definition. Mentally healthy, you are productive, fully functioning, or functioning and productive. You have stresses, you can get up and keep moving, and you can contribute to your society. Ill health is the opposite of this. So what are some big indicators that we can look at? Number one is your sleeping. Everyone just, you know, sit down and have a think of how you've been sleeping in the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks actually. Is your sleep pattern the same? Do you have difficulty falling asleep? Do you have difficulty staying asleep? Do you have difficulty waking up? Eating habits. Is your diet the same, less, more than before in this 2 weeks period? Going back to sleeping, do you fall asleep and, you know, sleep for the 10 hours and wake up the next day and you're still lethargic, you can't function, you don't know, and you're going, oh my goodness, I've just been sleeping all night, and say, there's a problem. The other thing we look at is your relationships. How have your relationships been in the last 2 weeks? Are you keeping the same set of friends? Have you changed your friends? What is the pattern, or what is the trigger of the kinds of friends you keep? Because that in turn speaks to the social relationships, and also it in turn speaks to what kind of social habits you have. You know, you and I might be friends today and we like reading, but in the last 2 weeks we really haven't been hanging out. And I've been hanging out with a different group of people, and guess what? This group of people, all we do is drink grog all night, every night. That's why I'm hanging out with them. And I don't like hanging out with you because you're going to keep correcting me. Yeah. So notice those changes. If I'm one of those people who's going this way, I need to come and stop and go, okay, hang on, something's not right. This is not me. If you have children, withdrawal or differences in behavior, someone who's usually out there, loves playing rugby, netball, hanging out with friends, all of a sudden, over the past couple of weeks, you've noticed them just staying in the room. Don't want to come and see the Tavales when they come, and just like, you know, sussing out everything, spending too much time on the gadget. These are all indicators that something is happening with their mental health, which may not be so healthy. So those are general indicators. If we had to talk about suicide specifically, there are indicators for suicide. There are also indicators for depression. Then we also have what we, in the realm of mental illness itself, we have different psychoses that people may have, where like they all of a sudden we think they've snapped. So we also have that. For you to see, to be able to make a judgment of a person, you look at their base behavior, how they normally behave, and what the new behavior is, or the changed behavior. Can be good, can be bad. For those people in leadership, one very good way of pointing out if something is happening is looking at pictures of them. We no longer care about the amount of weight we put on, our hair is going white all the time, one eyebrow is done, the other one isn't. These are all indicators something's happening, and this individual is not checking their mental health. So yeah, these are some very broad guidelines, so to speak, when we're talking about mental health. Then of course we're talking about the words people use. Someone who's usually mellow, all of a sudden is always getting angry. What's triggering that? Or maybe he has high blood pressure. Why is the high blood pressure? Maybe there is diabetes. So all these guys like to hang out together, these groups. We call them comorbid conditions. So if this is happening, you need to say, okay, Sid, I need to check myself. I need to ask for help. Not all of us will have the time to look at all these big indicators. So, if you're watching, listening, look at your sleeping, look at your eating or diet, sleeping, diet, social relationships. These three are very different from what it is normally for you. You need to get some help.
Based on the cases that come to you, what is the data telling you in terms of ethnic cases? Where is stress, mental illnesses more prevalent amongst which ethnic group?
Okay. I have a lot of different people come and see me. I also visit a lot of different communities. I say more males than female come and visit me. In terms of ethnic breakdown, I have more Itoke visiting me, I guess because I'm also Itoke. But in the groups or in the communities that we go to and hospital or help seeking behavior, the Fiji Indian is more likely to help seek than the Itoke Fijian. And it has been this way. This help-seeking behavior pattern has been this way for a very long time. I know that politically we're told not to talk about ethnicity. I challenge that, and I actually think that it's wrong that we hide ethnicity, because the ethnicity will tell us then how to put or what interventions to put in place. For example, let's talk about something very basic like diabetes. If I'm Fijian, my diet is most likely going to be indalo and tapioca and the rest of it. Very high in carbs, possibly starchy, affecting the diabetes. If you're Fiji of Indian descent, your diabetes, what is your diet? And if you had to get amputated, who's going to stay and help you? Because the way the Itoke is set up, there's a lot of extended family around that Itoke person. The Fiji Indian, you're going to get amputated, your nuclear family is the one that suffers. So we need to look at ethnicity, because ethnicity will help us identify some of the interventions that we need to put in place that is specific because of your ethnic group. We're not trying to politicize anything by talking about the numbers are high in this ethnicity or in that ethnicity, but these are facts. And the world over, whether you look at diabetes, whether you look at high cardiovascular, whether you look at RHD, you need to look at ethnicity, because that talks to you about etiology. Etiology then points a direction of where your intervention needs to come from.
What about cases at the St. Giles Hospital based on, again, ethnicity? What's the data telling you?
Unfortunately, I don't have the specific data on ethnicity for the hospital. Admissions, we just have the categorization of males and females right now, and that's possibly the only information that we can share publicly. But I'm sure if we request or try and see where it is at, or when you go and visit them, you will see for yourself the types, the different ethnic groups that are looked after in St. Giles Hospital.
I'm intrigued at what you said in the middle of the interview. By looking at a picture, you can say how a politician has fared along the years. If I were to ask you your opinion on the current Prime Minister from 2006 to now, you must have seen his picture. What does the picture tell you?
The picture tells me, a picture speaks 1,000 words. Obviously, there has been a lot of stress in the line of work, and I say that for any Prime Minister in any country. Ours is no different. I also would say that the aging, the white hair, I'm sure if they're watching this, they're going to be saying, you two have aged since we last met. But the aging, the putting on of weight, the general the general behavior, if we looked at our Prime Minister's photos today and the photos from yesteryears, if we look at photos today or video clips today and compare it to yesteryears, I will let the viewers decide what they think has changed and if it has changed for the better or for the worse. I am not in a state where I can say, oh, this is it or this is not it, but I can say just from general observations that these are some general comments about the leadership of any country. That it takes a toll on you, and I would say it has not spared our Prime Minister.
Finally, for this segment, do you think the voter needs to know the health status of a politician who's vying to become the Prime Minister or lead the country?
Health status information is confidential to an individual. I think the case would depend on each individual person and how much comfort they have in disclosing publicly their medical information. The former Prime Minister of Great Britain, not the recent, not the female one, 2 years ago, two terms ago, had depression, and he had absolutely no problems telling the world, I am depressed. I suffered from depression for many years, and this is what I'm taking to help me. So he became a mental health advocate. So you can talk about it in a manner that brings about less discrimination. You can talk about mental health in a way that makes people want to think about their mental health. So yeah, it does. The responsibility of disclosing medical information is upon the individual who's running for political office. But I will also challenge them that if you are running for political office, please be healthy in state of mind and also physically, because 800,000 people are looking up to you to help us move, to help us be better versions of ourselves. And we can't help unhealthy people physically or mentally leading us if we're all going to just continue on this pattern where we don't know what's happening tomorrow.
Selina, thank you very much. We will continue the discussion after the break when we discuss stress and depression.
We were around when the deed was first signed. We were around when the first car engine roared. We were around when the very first was crowned. Through devastations, jubilant celebrations, and the milestones. We will continue to be around to bring you all the stories first.
Welcome back, and Selina Kuruleca is joining me again. Selina, let's start this segment and speak about funding towards state funding towards fighting illness of mental health, well-being. Are you satisfied with the current level of funding that the government is giving?
Man, this time they won't give us any money if I speak out of turn. The funding could be better. The funding definitely could be better. This year in our budget, I believe there's 50,000 that's been allocated for mental health activities and programs. When we talk about mental health, again, we're talking right across the spectrum. Suicide, depression, anxiety, school programs. So all of this is supposed to be covered under this, which brings us to, if we looked at it globally, just as a comparison purposes, 2017 WHO Mental Health Atlas In 2017, there was $2.50 USD per head spent on mental health in developed countries. In Western Pacific region, $1.10 USD spent on the mental health of an individual. In Fiji, 5 cents USD spent on mental health. Just USD, 5 cents USD. Just goes to show that there must be more investment if we are to get ourselves out of this. Just the other day, I was sharing at a conference I spoke at. Australia in 2017, 2018 lost 10.6 billion to people who had a mental health related issue. 10.6 billion 1 year. And they have calculated that it would increase at a rate of 1.5% per year. So 10 billion, lost productivity because people can't focus when they go to work. Why can't they focus? They're worried about what their children are going to eat. Can't focus because they had domestic with their husband, wife, partner. Can't focus because they don't know how much money they'll have to be able to pay the mortgage at the end of the day. Can't focus because there's no job security. And all those issues they're facing in Australia, we're also facing it here. The only difference is perhaps we don't really have a plan of what we're going to do about this.
So in other words, if the funding is low, the victims will rise in the coming years.
If the funding is low, we are less likely to implement programs that could keep people mentally healthy, less likely to implement programs and research that will allow us to put in better interventions for our people. So funding needs to be key, and we got all the statistics to support why we need funding. So I hope that in the years to come that there will be due diligence and consideration given to funding appropriate programs, because this is about saving our children, saving ourselves from going into this downward spiral where we become dependent on a system that is not helping us. That we can't get up and fend for ourselves, I think about a cyclone. Before a cyclone comes, 2-3 generations ago, they knew how to keep their seedlings. They knew what to do in terms of water safety. Today, they're waiting for government handout. We've become a population that is just sitting like this. But we are not these people, both you and I. And we never used to look at our ethnicity. It's the politics that threw the ethnicity card at us. And I keep saying everything is political at the end of the day. It is, but also take away the politics and you have your son, your daughter, your mother, your father sitting in front of you who could be suffering from severe depression, but you're so busy fighting the politics, you're not even looking at the depression. And this is it. And depression, just like any other mental health issue, we don't see it until we're sitting there having a conversation with that person. Physical disability, I look across the room and I see, oh no, Sophia is got a cast on her leg. She's physically disabled. But mental health issue, she's sitting there, lipstick looks prime and proper, but upstairs maybe not everything is working.
Depression and stress, how prevalent is that in our society currently?
There's the only stats would be available at St. Giles Hospital. I don't have that the empirical evidence, but what we do have is people who have come and seen us, who've asked for help. What we do have is when we go to NGOs and people who come to the NGOs to seek help. Lifeline Fiji, Fiji Women's Crisis Center, during the height of COVID, you had people, from 400 calls a day, from 400 calls a month, they were fielding up to 800 calls a month. For us, those are indicators that the levels of stress, the levels of unwellness in the community were pretty high.
Fiji has a young population currently, almost 60% below 35.
Yeah.
Are we sitting on a ticking time bomb if things are not done properly? And
Yes. I think we're sitting. We haven't seen the worst yet. I'm sorry. I feel really bad saying this. We haven't seen the worst yet. This is the generation which were born with gadgets in their hands. This is also the generation where a lot of the education system here in Fiji changed. This is also the generation that was met with COVID. So, you know, the way they speak, the way they interact will become more and more distant. And of course, the more and more distant we become, the more the mental health issues that will arise. We've also become a population, or a young population, that is uncaring and not compassionate. You can see it in our suicide numbers. You can see it in the long lines in our residential homes. You know, you can see it in how people have left to go overseas, and some of these people overseas are not looking after their own families here. So yes, we're sitting on a ticking time bomb. We have so many issues that could be addressed systematically and pragmatically if there was consultation. People sat down and said, right, you know, these are our hotspots. How do we know these are our hotspots? Because we went out there and talked to the people. This is what they're wanting. We also have to ask them what they can do. Like in a hurricane season, this is what they can do. What can we do? Let's meet halfway. But a lot of times we're not having those conversations. We've ceased to have those conversations over the years. I want to challenge all of us. As you're preparing, because many of these people are also going to be voting, preparing to go into the elections, vote for the best benefit to you and to your family, to your community, moving forward. Us people as a population, we have very bad short-term memory. We forget all the good and all the bad that happened during COVID. And I want to remind us, let's think about this, not because we want to point fingers, but we know that there is a problem, identify the problem, find a solution to the problem.
If I were to ask you, how much money should the government put into fighting all these illnesses, what's the figure you're looking at that will do the miracle?
I better make a, if I had to look only at state funding in this, nothing short of 10 million. State funding to improve our hospital, psychiatric hospital, to refurbish our stress wards, to train our nurses, our mental health workers, our healthcare providers, to be better able to manage and address the mental health situations or social issues that come from the community. To put into place effective programs that will help not only the individual but their family, their community, our Fiji.
Do you get sad when you are not able to treat somebody who has come to you?
Very very sad, and it also gets me very frustrated because, you know, you try and do what you think, or you try and communicate as best as you can what you think is good for them, but at the end of the day you also need to learn. In my line of work, I need to learn to let go, because at the end of the day it's still their problem, not mine. I've learned to not take things personally. I've also learned to, you know, self-care, or breathe my own oxygen first and be set and stable before I help somebody else. I've also learned that for everything that we do, that there are consequences, and this is part of life. As long as we're able to talk about it in a manner that is healthy and adds value, then we shouldn't be able to, you know, we shouldn't worry about talking about these issues.
Selina Kuruleca, thank you very much for speaking with us, and that's the program for today. Join me again soon when we have another guest as we go towards the elections on December 14th. Thank you very much.